Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
What are you doing?
Booze Crew. He is being so mean to me right now.
Definitely not. Definitely never, ever, ever.
How dare you?
You did it. You did it back to me. So, I mean, it is what it is.
I'm just kidding. Welcome back, everybody.
To For the Booze.
That's right.
For the Booze.
For the Booze.
We are back for yet another week of this spooky stuff. And I alluded to this last week that we would be covering a place that has a story of an evil doctor.
Oh.
And I will not let you down because we are coming with that story of the evil doctor of Virginia.
Virginie?
Virginie. But before we get into this, I do want to play something. It's not, unfortunately, not a listener story.
Boo.
But it's about a minute long, and we're just going to give a little shout out to a friend of ours, so away we go.
Are you troubled by strange cryptids in the middle of the night? Do you experience feelings of dread in the middle of your house or at town hall? Have you or your family experienced something odd or unusual? If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up the phone and call the professionals.
Maximum Oddities.
Our courteous and professional staff is available 24 hours for all of your oddities needs.
We're ready to astonish you.
That's right. Our friend Rick is back over at Maximum Oddities for a new season.
Oh, yeah.
And the first episode is a good one. It's about the Cincinnati subway, which I had never even heard of.
Oh.
But I checked it out, and it was really awesome. So,
Cool.
Everybody, make sure you go support the friends of the podcast.
Yes. Our friendly neighborhood, not neighborhood podcasters.
Yes, our friendly neighborhood Rick, but not neighborhood Rick. But we played that for him because this is also a suggestion from Mr. Maximum Oddities himself. And we are traveling up to the, what I would argue is the north. He says it's the south. But Rick, if you're listening, we all know the truth. The Mason-Dixon line is imaginary. You live in the north. And that, you can't even argue this with me now because you're not on the podcast with me. So it is what it is. But we're going to Virginia. He's still a good friend of mine, though. Don't worry. And we're going to Virginia, and we are going to a little town, which I thought was very interesting when he was telling me about it, because the name of the town is Staunton.
Staunton? Oh.
It's like Taunton, but with an S in front of it. It's very weird.
Staunton,
Virginia, and we are going to go to
the Dejarnette Sanitarium.
Indeed.
Yes.
The Dejarnette Sanitarium. And this place has an incredibly dark history.
Oh, boy.
It's going to be a little reminiscent of last week. It's pretty bad. I'm not going to go into as much detail about the torturous stuff. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, but you'll see this story spans a good chunk of time and some very notable moments in history. And it is, we've never done a sanitarium before. We've done sanatoriums, which if you're a listener and you don't know the difference, sanatoriums were set up for people with tuberculosis, and sanitariums were like the original mental health facilities.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't expecting to find, I knew throughout history, like sanitariums weren't going to be great places, but you're gonna hear why this one was so bad.
Ugh.
And it's pretty gross. If you really think about it, it might be the worst place we've covered.
Ew, I don't want to do that. Yuck.
Well, this is where we get our stories from. So, unfortunately, you're going to learn some stuff, Megan.
I am going to learn some stuff because I know nothing. And this will be the first time I am hearing this.
Look.
I'm excited.
You couldn't pronounce a word. Okay, you know things.
Some things. I just suck at reading sometimes.
No, you sound great every episode. What are you talking about?
Yeah, because you cut out all my dyslexic moments and stuff, you know?
It's the wonderful magic of editing.
The power of editing.
So what do you
That's
say
right.
we get into this twisted tale?
Okay, I'm excited. Let's do it.
Away we go. The Dejarnette Sanitarium sits empty and deteriorating on a hill in Staunton, Virginia. The eerie ruin stands out among the modern buildings surrounding it and is made all the more chilling by the hospital's link to one of the leading advocates for eugenics in Virginia. The sanitarium was founded in 1932 by Dr. Joseph Dejarnette, who was also the director of the nearby Western State Hospital. The sanitarium was a private unit for middle-income patients that operated separately from the government-supported state hospital. Joseph Dejarnette was born on his family's plantation, Pine Forest, in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, to parents Elliot Hawes Dejarnette, formerly a captain in the Confederate Army, and Evelyn Magruder Dejarnette. The Dejarnettes were descended from French Huguenot immigrants who settled in Virginia during the colonial period and had been prominent in Virginia planter class society for generations. His maternal grandfather, Benjamin Henry Magruder, was a prominent Virginia lawyer and legislator, and in 1864 was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. His uncle Daniel Coleman Dejarnette was a prominent Virginia politician who served in the Virginia House of Delegates, United States Congress, and the Confederate Congress during the Civil War. After graduating from the Medical College of Virginia in 1888, Dejarnette practiced at the R.E. Lee Camp Confederate Soldiers' Home in Richmond for a year before joining the staff of the Western Lunatic Asylum in Staunton. The asylum was renamed Western State Hospital in 1894. On February 14, 1906, he married a colleague, Dr. Chertsey Hopkins, a physician at Western State Hospital, as he was advised that being a stable, married man was necessary for career advancement. She continued to practice medicine following the marriage, and the couple had no children. In 1906, Dejarnette worked with Aubrey Strode and Albert Priddy to establish the Virginia State Colony for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded in Lynchburg. Strode was an American lawyer and politician. A Democrat, he was a member of the Virginia Senate, representing the state's 19th district. He was also a strong advocate for Jim Crow laws. Strode would author Virginia's sterilization law called the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. Dejarnette was a respected doctor among the white Virginia elite at the time, but his career would ultimately be defined by his strong support for eugenics, specifically the forced sterilization of the mentally ill and others that he deemed, quote, defective. Dr. Dejarnette felt sterilization was the only way to preserve the integrity of society. In fact, and somewhat ironically, he was part of a larger movement toward more humane mental health treatment, but he was bullish on this point. He even wrote a poem extolling the virtues of proper humane breeding and came to be known among his colleagues as the, quote, sterilization Dejarnette, unquote. Dejarnette lobbied passionately for the compulsory sterilization of members of society considered, quote, unfit to breed, and Virginia's legislature served as the model for forced sterilization laws in at least 12 other states. Dejarnette famously testified against Carrie Buck in the famous eugenics case Buck versus Bell, with funding from huge corporate philanthropies, mainly the Carnegie Institution, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Harriman Railroad fortune. The U.S. would eventually sterilize over 60,000 Americans deemed, quote, unfit, which were mainly Native Americans, African Americans, the, quote, feeble-minded or intellectually disabled, the insane, and even the poor. 8,000 of those people were sterilized in Virginia. In 1938, Dejarnette lamented the progress of eugenics in the U.S., saying, quote, the Germans are beating us at our own game, unquote, in reference to the Nazi eugenics movement. Other similar remarks earned him a less than favorable reputation in later years. On recommendation from the doctor, the Virginia General Assembly ordered the construction of a semi-private sanitarium for people with mental afflictions, including alcoholism and drug addiction in 1932. The facility would be constructed and opened in the same year as the special pay unit of the Western State Hospital and named after the doctor himself. Under Dejarnette's supervision, electroshock and insulin treatments were used on patients who suffered from dementia praecox or schizophrenia. Dejarnette, in his own personal papers, notes the characteristics of the illness as disorientation, loss of contact with reality, splitting of the personality. Heredity, Dejarnette writes, quote,
is a decided etiological factor in both dementia praecox and manic depressive psychosis. But the difference in the inheritance being, in dementia praecox, all members of the family are liable to transmit the disease to offspring, while in manic depressive psychosis, the individual who is suffering from the disease is the one most liable to transmit it.
Dejarnette notes some of the preeminent symptoms of dementia praecox being shunted personality, inordinate laughter, vacant stare into space, delusions of grandeur, and perversions of the ego, drooling of the mouth, and impulsiveness. On January 17, 1938, insulin treatments, which were experimental, began with, quote, chronic cases averaging from 8 to 15 years duration and with a hopeless prognosis. The procedure went on as follows. 40 units of insulin are given to the patient, quote,
at 7 a.m., intramuscularly, no breakfast, and increased 10 units daily until coma is produced. Some cases requiring as much as 645 units to produce a comatose condition, but the average number of units given was 200.
This particular treatment was administered to 48 male patients. Dejarnette continues, quote,
we usually had 2 physicians in attendance and an attendant for each patient to avoid accident from sudden collapse, struggling and choking from the saliva. The 16% of the cases that had convulsions had better results from the treatment. They were allowed to remain in the coma for 2 to 3 hours and were then brought out by intravenous injections of 500 cc's of 33 1/3% glucose, which usually arouse them in 2 to 8 minutes, sufficiently to drink 2 pints of milk each, containing 8 ounces of sugar well dissolved. In less than 10 minutes, they were fairly awake.
A physician was kept on the ward day and night, as well as trained attendants. Of the 48 treated with insulin, Dejarnette recorded that 23 were, quote, apparently cured. 6 of them were, quote, improved sufficiently to go home. 3 were, quote, greatly improved, and 16 were, quote, still under treatment. Dejarnette notes that, quote, between the treatments of the patients were encouraged to play games, read, walk, and live a normal life. Treatment continued until February 27, 1939, when the hospital, quote, had 1 death from a non-reversible case, unquote. The sterilizations that the doctor pushed for were most likely conducted at the state hospital, and not at the sanitarium. In 1938, the Peary building was constructed next to the original sanitarium, and the entire complex provided 171 beds. The grounds also held tennis courts and a golf course for recreational therapy. In 1946, the sanitarium separated from the state hospital and operated independently. Dr. Dejarnette retained the position of superintendent of both Western State Hospital and the sanitarium until his retirement in 1947. In 1972, the General Assembly's Commission on Mental Indigent and Geriatric Patients, or, quote, Hearst Commission, recommended that the Dejarnette Center be used to serve, quote, the hundreds of children and youth with severe behavioral disorders. In 1975, the Commonwealth of Virginia took responsibility of the entire complex, and the focus of the hospital changed to treating children and adolescents with severe emotional disorders. Patients over 21 were moved to the new campus of Western State Hospital. The campus transformed from a private enterprise to a state-managed healthcare system and was also renamed the Dejarnette Center for Humane Development. A new central building was constructed which connected the two sanitarium buildings together. When the adolescent unit at Western State Hospital closed, minors were permanently transferred to the Dejarnette Center, making it one of the busiest times in the hospital's history. A concrete above-ground pool was put in around this time, but only saw a short lifespan. In 1987, the stock markets crashed, leading toward an underfunded institution and poor quality of care. The outdated buildings would eventually be replaced with a newer children's hospital on the grounds of Western State Hospital, their new campus, and the old sanitarium was shut down in 1996. The facility did not retain Dejarnette's name due to his now discredited history. The building still stands empty on the hill. Though there have been various plans for its demolition and redevelopment, none have yet to come to fruition. In 2001, the relocated Dejarnette Center was named the Commonwealth Center for Children and Adolescents due to Dejarnette's name's association with eugenics. The state of Virginia has publicly apologized for the sterilization program and offered a reparations settlement to its victims. Some say the building is haunted. It is, but not necessarily by ghosts, but by memories, experiences, and emotions of nearly a century of the troubled and sick, whether or not those individuals still live. There are those who rally against and abandon buildings standing out amongst the modern design of today. The city of Staunton plans to demolish the Dejarnette building and replace it with stores and room for new businesses, according to NBC 29 as of 2016. Over the past decade, the state of Virginia has decided to board up the abandoned site to deter trespassers. While exploring the site is strictly prohibited, some people have made it inside. Visitors say that the restless spirits of Dejarnette's victims still haunt the building, and their screams can be heard echoing through the halls. Moans, whispers, phantom footsteps, and doors opening of their own accord have all been reported to this day.
Wow, it's a weird place. I get very weird vibes from that place. Like, oh, we'll put these people into a coma and wake them up with some milk.
Well, I think more troubling is the practice of eugenics and the backing of the Jim Crow laws, and what we're going to find out later in the story is that this is just one thing that they did in the realm of medical experimentation.
Well, absolutely.
Now,
that's the worst part.
This place has a very strange history. It actually went on later to become a children's home, where during the 80s and stuff, there are a bunch of stories you can go online and find of people who go onto all these various websites that talk about this place and talk about their experience in here. Like people my age.
Oh, like from when they went there when they were a kid?
When they were in foster care.
Oh.
And some of the stories, some of the people do have very fond memories of friends that they made there or whatnot. And but others are not so nice, where they were strapped down into rooms all hours of the day and this terrible care.
Ugh.
But that's not even the bad stuff. The bad stuff happened when Dejarnette was running the hospital. And there is more about that into your story. Mm-hmm. And it's going to you're going to see what I mean. Like there was a lot more going on there than just what we just touched to scratch the surface here.
Yeah.
There's not a gold mine of information on this place outside of pretty much everything we're going to read on here. But there is the indication from everybody who knows what this place is that it was either a horrid place that you were put into as a child or the most haunted place you've ever been to. But there never seems to be something in the middle.
Oh.
It's very strange.
Wow.
It's unlike a lot of the places we look up, because a lot of the places we find are, ooh, is it, could it be? And this one is more like it is, or it just straight up isn't, but you went there and it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And it was just such a weird topic to look up, because I've never really seen one like this. I've never really read on one like this.
Right.
And the pictures of the place are, I may have met my match as far as places. I don't know if I would want to go in. It is very creepy. Very, very creepy. It is like all the places we've talked about over the past year, and some bundled up into one. Only every person that goes there talks about a terrible feeling they get when they get there.
Like an ominous feeling to start
Like
out,
something-
and then it
like-
adds to?
Like
or?
something dark and heavy is just there and watching you and
Ew.
making you feel weird. And I guess there's a cemetery on site somewhere, which we didn't write about. I wanted to focus more on the actual sanitarium. And there's like tunnels and stuff, but I couldn't really find much on them other than the fact that they are there.
Okay.
But the thing you need to remember is, like, the reason there's not a lot on this place is because they don't invite you in. I know they did do ghost tours for a little while, but I guess they found traces of asbestos.
Ooh.
And they stopped letting people go in.
Yeah, that's not good.
But for like a year or two, you could go on ghost hunts through here. But other than that, this place is off limits. Like, you will get arrested if you try to go in here.
Wow.
And there's cameras up because it's owned by the museum, like, next door. So
Wow.
there's not a lot on it, but the stuff you do find on it is pretty hard pressed in one direction or the other. So just keep that in mind. And there's a lot of different stories, and you'll find paranormal stories, and then you'll find stories of people who basically grew up here in the hospital.
That's crazy. And I feel like we've been doing so much like tuberculosis type stuff that I'm used to hearing about the treatments and things like that when I hear sanatoriums. But now we're talking about a sanitarium, and we've never talked about what used to happen
At sanitariums.
at sanitariums, and especially like this one, the sterilization.
You're about to find out just how primitive the medical procedures at tuberculosis hospitals were because of the times, not because of that's what they did. Because you're gonna hear a lot of crossovers. So I guess they just took these as general treatments for anything that ailed you, and they were just the worst things ever. So,
Man.
but I think that's the history, and I think it's about time to get on to the mystery. What do you say?
All right. That's my favorite part.
That's my favorite.
All
So we're going to have to take an ad break first, so we will be back after an ad break.
And now, back to the good stuff. Virginia is filled with history, but perhaps one of the most iconic relics of its storied past are the long abandoned places that dot its landscape. Covered in overgrown bush, decaying, and sometimes rumored to be haunted, and sitting among these long forgotten buildings is the Dejarnette Center. But why does it stand out amongst all the other well-known haunted locations? The real horrors of Dejarnette came from the doctor that gave the hospital its name. Dr. Joseph Dejarnette gained a reputation for human experiments. Given his obsession with eugenics and his blatant disregard for human rights, what went on inside of his facility should not come as a surprise. Hospital staff subjected patients to sterilizations, lobotomies, electric shock therapy, physical coercion, and other wildly accepted forms of abuse and stomach-turning treatment methods. He also used extreme X-ray exposure as a method of sterilization, which almost certainly would have left its patients with adverse side effects. He would often take the blood from the most hyperactive children and inject it into those who were depressed. he was also known for roaming the halls while quoting Adolf Hitler, claiming that human sterilization was his greatest work. Because of these experiments and the strange sightings that have occurred on the premises since, many paranormal investigators now believe that the building is possibly haunted. A quick search for Dejarnette pulls up scores of ghost hunter type videos showing the usual fare: brave explorers with flashlights and ghost tracking equipment entering a looming, abandoned brick building. The white 2-story columns on the front almost seem to glow in the dark. The rows of windows flanking the entrance are boarded up, giving the facade an eerie appearance. Inside, someone insists they saw a shadow move. Someone else calls out that they felt a cold draft. Dr. Joseph Dejarnette's evil spirit is said to walk the halls here. Some say they've heard children's voices in the darkness, or moans and other noises from the former patients, reported to have perished due to medical experiments of all kinds. It's doubtful that the teens who once lived here were aware of the doctor's name. Most weren't. However, the building's ties to eugenics were among the first things new kids learned about when entering the center. Some people believed decades of past experiences and emotions can leave residual energy in a place. Maybe that's partly what the ghost hunters are searching for, because when you consider the collective traumas and experiences of all those who spent time in the dark, state-run institution, there was plenty of opportunity for future hauntings. Black Raven Paranormal is a paranormal investigation and research organization originally established in 2005 as the Shenandoah Valley Paranormal Society. The group travels across the country investigating reportedly haunted sites in the hopes of debunking stories or capturing evidence. Marty Siebel, an active paranormal investigator for over 13 years, explains that history is the driving force behind what he does, adding, quote,
"We learn from the past to ensure our future."
When asked about the history and controversy concerning the Dejarnette Center and its namesake's propagation of eugenics, Marty describes it as a local shame, claiming that Staunton natives don't like talking about it. Quote,
"It amazes me that it was one time such a big movement across the country, and that the driving force in Virginia was based right here in Staunton, Virginia, right here where I live."
October, a few years ago, Marty and his co-workers at Ghosts of Staunton's hosted walking ghost tours of the facility. When asked if there were any local legends about the Dejarnette facility, he responded with the story of Mr. Atlee. Quote,
"There was a patient there in the early 1960s named Mr. Atlee. It is said he was a patient here and never spoke a word the many years he was at the sanitarium. Not a word during his entire stay until the last week he was still alive. A few days before his passing, he made a comment he would never be able to leave the sanitarium. There are stories of nurses and staff seeing him shortly after his passing at various locations on the 3rd floor. It is also stated many would hear the sound of grinding, like grinding your teeth. Staff spoke that when he was alive, he would sit at his wheelchair and grit his teeth, making a grinding sound. Mr. Atlee did exist. The other information we have is no documentation to prove."
While there are plenty of articles stating that there is a possibility that the sanitarium is haunted, there aren't as many specifics as you would think. So we took to the internet to find reviews and people's stories of the hospital. June 4th, 2014. Jennifer Guthrie wrote on hauntedhovel.com, quote,
When it comes to ghostly matters, there was one instance in which I was taking pictures of a room through a broken window of a door. I was looking at the screen as I did this in the first photo I took. I could tell it went wonky on me, so I assumed I had jerked the camera and deleted the photo. I tried again, I believe 2 more times, and the photo kept getting this strange weave through it. I was surprised, as I have never had this happen at any cemeteries or anything that I visited in my research, and got a little creeped out by it, and excited at the same time. None of the other inside photos came out like that. All normal. But a couple outdoor photos later also got that same strange weave through it. I would like to think I captured something, of course, but who knows?
End quote. November 16th, 2016. Someone wrote on virginiahauntedhouses.com, quote,
I was there from June 2008 to October 2008, and I know for a fact that the place is haunted. Dark figures in the hallway, going into the doctor's office. Something pushed on my back when I was sleeping one night and woke me. No one was around. Gave me the creeps.
End quote. April 2nd, 2017, on hauntedplaces.org. Cami J.G. wrote, quote, There are a couple doors that look like they could be open, but I was too scared to go in alone. There's a little building in the back that you might be able to go into, but I felt really negative energy coming from there. Also, I heard a door shut and someone walking when I looked through a broken window. It's definitely not haunted by an evil spirit. Just seems sad. Like a lot of pain went down in that building. Makes sense considering the backstory. The graffiti is also funny. LMAO. End quote. 5 years ago, on the popular YouTube channel, The Proper People, they released their first edition of a series called Bumps in the Night, where they explored the Dejarnette Sanitarium, and this is what happened. The video opens up with the 2 guys in the main hallway, and they go on to explain how they have both always been very skeptical of the paranormal, but they're open-minded and not going to say something's impossible. As they make their way throughout the building, it is very apparent that it has been long forgotten as walls have collapsed and roots have grown through them. As they continue on their tour, they move to the 2nd floor, where they reach a room that has the words, Dr. Joseph Dejarnette, you're being called out, is spray painted on the wall. They're walking down a long hallway. There's not much going on. That is, until 2 very large bats start to dive bomb them, and they start giggling, making fun of each other, talking about the bats possibly having rabies. But just a moment after that, as the guys are walking, you can very clearly hear the sound of a door creaking, though nobody has touched the door at any point. After a while, they reach the 3rd floor, where you can see the patient's room's doors that have been left wide open. The ceilings are slanted, making each room feel smaller than it really is. The paint is peeling from the walls, and graffiti is everywhere. They start to question if this is where the doctor would keep his most defective patients. And you can start to hear taps and creaks coming from all around them inside the room. Across from them, on the wall, the words, Dejarnette lives here, can be seen painted. As the two men venture on, they stop frequently to ask the other one if they heard a noise, thinking they're hearing stuff coming from all around them. They enter a room where the walls are covered in handprints, and then another room that is covered in footprints, most likely created by the patients living there at the time. Throughout this entire time, taps, creaks, and little sounds can be heard almost non-stop. It is then, at 13 minutes and about 55 seconds, the two guys are walking down a long hallway, and you can hear booming footsteps making their way from one side of the building to the other. They race down the stairwell, looking for a way out of the building. It needs to be noted that as you watch this, you can hear the camera operator's heartbeat race while listening to what is going on around them. They stop and decide that they need to investigate. As they turn back to see where the footsteps were coming from, they immediately hear the footsteps again. This time, they do not run. And one of them says to the other, "We are not alone. There's somebody in here with us." And they head in the direction in which the sound was coming from to see what it could be. As they make their way back to the area from where the footsteps were heard, they pass through a doorway where they noticed one of the patient room doors that was open is now closed, somehow barricaded. They decide to knock on the door. Grunt can be heard in the audio as he is knocking. Getting no response, they both decide they'd had enough. And this is where the video ends. As the building still stands today, abandoned and boarded up, it is a popular location for urban explorers. The property has been purchased by private developers and is no longer owned by the state of Virginia. Keep in mind, if you choose to ignore the no trespassing signs and explore the buildings yourself, you could face some hefty fines from local law enforcement, who patrol the area frequently. But, as a hotspot for paranormal activity, if you find yourself exploring the halls of the once controversial hospital, beware of what you might encounter. Will you make it out safely, or could you become the next patient of Dr. Joseph Dejarnette's unconventional treatments?
Now, I want to say that when I watched that video, it was only 22 minutes long, and possibly the most nerve-wracking paranormal video I've ever seen.
Wow, really?
Yeah. There is, at the end of that video, they actually sit in their car before they even leave the site, and they talk about how they don't think anything paranormal happened. But what they are not privy to is that as you're listening, you can hear these grunt sounds and stuff coming through like an EVP. They're loud.
Just on the camera audio.
You can hear it. And the creepiest thing, well, the thing that made it weird, the weirdest to listen to was the one investigator. You could hear his heartbeat the whole time.
That's crazy.
And when things were like amping up, you could hear it start to pound really hard. And it just made it feel, I don't know, it just gave it like a really weird feeling.
Wow.
It was a really good video. So if you guys are out there, you should definitely check it out. It's Proper People. I think the video is from about 5 years ago, but it's a good one. Like, I definitely suggest watching it. It's nerve-wracking.
Wow.
It is.
That's crazy. I haven't even seen it, and I was just I was definitely into that story.
It's a pretty good one. And the building is super creepy itself, so go give it a listen. And yeah, so a lot of torturous things went on here. Like, maybe at the time, I mean, outside of him basically wanting to be a Nazi, I feel like some of those treatments were pretty par for the course, though. Like, that's just what they did. I mean, it was definitely torturous, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he was, like, operating out of the scope of, like, modern-day medical practices at the time.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was in the 30s and 40s, and it was definitely a long time ago, and there were many unconventional methods back then. But I think that goes back around to the sterilization part of things and just how absolutely wrong that was. And I don't think you hear very much about that kind of thing back in the day. Like it wasn't this huge thing. It was kind of almost like an underground practice, I guess.
It's a thing that was forgotten by time, and for good reason, because they were literally just trying to get rid of certain kinds of people. And it was a common practice for a while. So I think really it's awful. Like, I'm definitely not, it's not okay.
Right.
And I've read the poems out there. You know, I'm kind of all over the place, but I actually did read some of the poems by this doctor, and they are not good.
Oh.
He was definitely a racist man. They are just not good. If it's something you're interested in, you can just Google Dr. Joseph Dejarnette. You'll find him. And he was just a terrible person.
Gross.
You know, anybody who idolized the Nazis is probably not the best people.
Yeah.
So, whatever. I mean, he was a terrible person. I'm sure a lot of people died here. I couldn't really find anything as far as like how many people may have died here. Mm-hmm. I know people died there. I know they did.
I mean, I would absolutely assume
they were
so.
putting them into insulin comas and stuff like that in the 30s. Okay,
yeah.
So yeah,
I think it would be interesting to get those numbers and to see how many people, like records and stuff, just to kind of put a number to it. But I mean, not that I'm like, yay, number of people that died or anything. I just realized how that kind of sounded.
There's a lot of like crisscross documentation, because if you go online, a lot of people will be telling you about the Dejarnette Hospital, but they're really talking about the second coming of the hospital, which was the later built Western State Hospital. And so they get them crisscrossed a lot.
Right.
So I think you probably could find the numbers, but I think they'd be hard to find. Mm-hmm. And especially accurately.
Right.
So, all right, well, we've heard the stories. We've done the history thing, and we've done the creepy, spooky story thing.
Spooky ooky.
So I think there's only one thing left to do here.
Is it real?
Well, Stephen, I had the same thought myself. And I am just dying to know. Yes, me too. I am just dying to know, Megan. I'm dying to know. What do you think? This place is our first sanitarium. Mm-hmm. And it's got obviously some pretty controversial past. But what do you think? Do you think this hospital is haunted?
All right. I think I'm going to have to go with like a 70-30 on this one.
Okay.
I think 70% chance it could be haunted. Maybe like 30. Just by the way you described this video, just like one random video on the internet. And then
there's more.
No, I know. But like we only talked about the one video and then a couple reviews and things. I don't think it's like a crazy outlandishly haunted place. I think it's a vibe more than anything. I think maybe it's just a super oppressive, sad vibe that just looms over this place. And yeah, maybe there's like a couple bumps in the night, but I don't know. I'd want to know more for sure on this place.
Google it.
I don't know. I feel like like everybody else, we kind of just got the gist, but I think I'm definitely going to go look more into this place, more in depth. This place is intriguing.
Well, there's about 100 years of this place that I didn't even cover. So,
whoa.
Yes.
Okay. Well, for sure, I'm going to do that.
It was a whole other hospital before he ever even came along. I think it was built before he was born.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Holy crap. Well, Booze Crew, go check it out. I don't know. I feel like there's so much to this place, yet I feel like we barely touched on it, you know? So I definitely would want to know more. So what about you?
I think it is haunted.
Oh,
not even as 70 nothing. I think it is. And I think it's very haunted. Because while there have been no real investigations to go through there other than maybe a ghost tour that happened for a little while, it seems almost everybody who enters the doors there experiences something paranormal. Almost everyone. Whether they think it's paranormal or not, because like I said in that video that you read, they didn't think it was paranormal, yet people in the comment section said if you listen close enough, when he knocks on that door to ask who's in there, you can hear a voice, but they don't hear it.
Right.
Not to mention
on the audio.
The grunts sound like pigs. They don't sound like anything that should be there.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that.
And everybody who goes up there sees stuff or hears stuff or feels stuff. And like I said, it was a hospital 100 years before he showed up. And hospitals, unfortunately, people die there.
Yeah.
And if the practices were even more primitive at that point. So there's no telling how many people really died here. And then Dejarnette came along and did all these Nazi-type things to people and was trying to create basically a master race. And it's just the perfect paranormal concoction. I've said this before.
Yeah.
It really was. And then, it became a children's home, and I'm sure very unfortunate types of abuse would happen from there. And I read some of the stories of people who lived there, and while some of them did have some like good memories of the place, some of them had some really bad memories of the place. And kids who stayed there in the 80s and 90s had things happen to them paranormal wise.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's haunted.
Okay.
So even with your little 70-30,
I just want to know more.
that means that it gets
The big old seal of approval.
I mouthed it along with you because I enjoyed doing that when I did it. The one time I got to do it.
But this was a fun one, and I like this one because this was a lot different than a lot of stuff we get to cover. And I mean, enjoying is maybe not the right word.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yes.
I found it very interesting. So thank you, Rick, for the suggestion, and everybody make sure you go check out his show. It's on season 3 now, and
Yay.
good show. I'm trying to work out something with him. Maybe he'll be part of the Booze family.
What?
We'll see what happens.
Oh, that would be exciting.
I can't seem to get him on the hook yet. But that's where the story's going to end, and I'll be coming back with something next week. I'm not even going to allude to it because I don't know what it is.
Whoops.
You would think I had some kind of plan for the show, but I really don't. We just kind of go week by week. So
Don't tell them that.
I'm sure they already know. Where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at @forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at @forthebooze.
You can also find us on Twitter at For The Booze, and if you'd like for some reason to watch it on your screen as opposed to listening to it, well, I guess you'd still have to listen to it. You can find us on YouTube at For The Booze. And thank you to the few of you out there who have actually been listening on YouTube. I don't know why, I find that pretty cool, but the Waverly Hills Sanitarium was a popular one for some reason. And popular for us is we're not viral. We're talking like 40 views, but it's still cool.
Yeah.
It's still cool.
Super cool.
And don't forget, everybody, listener stories. I'm going to keep asking. So if you're tired of hearing about it, then just send them in and get it out of the way. You don't have to, I'm not talking to you anymore. So come on. We'd really like some stories. And last but not least, wherever you listen to your podcasts, maybe a little 5 stars in a review action, preferably on Apple. But hey, I'm not mad at you. Do it wherever you listen. That's fine with me.
Let us know what you like, what you think, and show your support.
That's right. See, would your marriage be as successful if you weren't allowed to talk to each other and, tell each other what you like? It's the same way. It's a relationship. Let's work together here. Yeah. So I think that's it for this week. What do you think?
I think so too. Thank you everybody so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.